Well, I just wanted to take this time, as I like to say, as I start every episode, and say, Josh Urban, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Oh,
Um,
it's my
and
pleasure, Aaron.
there's a lot, as you know, I'm someone who loves to philosophize about the universe. And trust me when I tell you that I have a lot of interesting questions for you. But the
Fantastic.
first question that I always love to ask people when they come here is, so who is Josh Urban?
Ooh, good question. Okay, so I will do it in a couple different ways. We can do what's that movie Adam Sandler, The Anger Management. He goes, no, no, no. Who is Josh Urban? So taking it from the top level. So I'm 36 years old. Um, I usually wouldn't use this descriptor to describe myself, but I think it's pertinent to our conversation. I'm sighted. I'm really into astronomy. I'm a musician, I'm an entertainer, I'm a DJ, I'm a writer, a speaker. I live on the East Coast. I'm currently moving from Maryland down into Virginia, down into the country, trying that country life. Uh, I like uh, I like long walks on the beach, all that good stuff. Love actually, all joking aside, love being out in nature. I'm a fan of history, of philosophy, of learning. Um, and recently, over the past almost year, have stumbled across the idea of presenting astronomy for the blind and low vision community, and that's just been so rewarding and such an honor to be part of that process. So that would be your top level. Who is Josh Urban?
And what made you want to start presenting astronomy itself? Basically, how did you get into astronomy? And why were you so motivated to present it to the blind community?
Great question. So I've been doing astronomy for two-thirds of my life now. I've always liked the natural sciences and ended up my grandma gave me this little book when I was, I don't know, probably about 11 or so, um, and I thought it was pretty cool, and I started doing some observing. Then my uncle sent me a telescope, and I got into that. And um, during the when I was in a being a teenager, when I was a teenager, it's hard to be a teenager, that's for sure. When I was a teenager, I decided to go into the field of entertainment, and that got me into primarily music, and that morphed into a couple of other things. So I had performance, I had teaching, and then I also got into DJing. DJing got me into DJing for senior citizens, which was been a something I do to this day, and it's quite rewarding. And I was making a cold call one day, and I said to this lady, "Would you like my music show to come by your community?" And she said, "Is it fun or is it educational?" I said, "Well, it's both, as a matter of fact." And she said, "Well, we're got plenty of entertainment, but we need some education here. Can you build us a class?" I said, "Absolutely." So I built them a class on music history. And I was talking to one of the ladies in the class. She was about 80, and I had this cool picture up on the screen. And I said, "Oh, look at this picture I have." And she said, "Well, I'd like to, but I'm losing my vision and I can't really see it." Caught off guard, I said, "Oh, well, I'll explain it to you." And that was the birth of the idea right there. It had rattled around in my head. I didn't even realize it was the idea at the time. Fast forward a couple months, I was hanging out during COVID. I was working in a nursing home full time. And one of my dear friends there, she was in her 90s, and she had was lost most of her vision. And I had been doing a ton of astronomy at the time. So I would sit there and I would tell her about the stars. And then I got to thinking, hey, this might be a cool thing. So I ended up wrote a piece about it. Researching the piece, I called the Maryland School for the Blind, and they said, "Hey, would you like to do a?" Oh, bless you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I never know what to say for a cough. Because the origin of bless you is they used to think your soul was escaping, and they would say bless you to like keep it in your body. I think is what it was. So a cough is apparently less severe. So watch yourself. I don't know. So, but anyway, where was it? Yeah. So I started doing this class for the Maryland School for the Blind, and I didn't really know what to expect because I participate in the universe in a very visual way. So I got to wonder, well, do people experience it in any other ways? And well, I'm preaching to the choir here. Absolutely, right? And there's many things that you can't, by definition, look at. A black hole, for instance, light doesn't come out of it. There's nothing to see there, right? But there's a lot going on there. The inside of a star, the inside of a planet, even the ground beneath your feet. Can't see all that. So, so then I realized that I get to transcribe the universe. Transcription is something I use in a musical term. So if let's say I take a printed piece of Johann Sebastian Bach's music and then play it on my electric guitar, that's a transcription. Well, here I am transcribing something that's infinitely cooler, space. And I just think that's the best thing in the world. So I'm having a blast with this so far. And it's such an honor to do that. So hopefully that is a roundabout answer to your question, but hopefully
Yeah,
that
yeah,
answers your question.
yeah. So I really appreciate the way that you got into that.
Oh, thanks.
And basically, I got into podcasting.
Yeah, how did you get
Not
into podcasting?
well. I'd be so pleased to tell you. So I was list. So, but I'm also a teacher. I've been teaching for 6 years, teaching
Good
English
for
as a
you.
second language. And I've been working online doing that. And what was happening was a couple years ago, I was listening to podcasts, in the blindness community. But I noticed that they just were not open enough to guests. And I felt that that was a big problem. One of the biggest problems, as you continue your podcast journey, and I know you will, one of the things that you will notice is that some of these podcasters kind of, as we say, can get a little too big for their boots and are
Okay.
not always receptive to guests and are not always receptive to people like you and I. And I have a problem with that. So I
Okay.
have a lot of opinions. I love to just talk and talk and talk. Talking to you makes me happy. Talking to students I just love to talk.
Nice.
Well, it occurred to me, well, if I push record, I can share what I'm saying with the world. And then eventually, a couple years later, after practicing the art of podcasting, I started to figure out, well, actually, this is starting to turn into a thing, an Aaron's Opinion, a podcast. That's how I got into it. So thank you for your answer. But
Thanks.
all right, well, strap yourself in. Here's the
Okay.
philosophy.
Here
So, look, a lot of people are trying to figure out what the truth is about the universe.
Right.
And we hear a lot of very interesting stories from YouTube to other podcasts to other articles to just, the guy next door, right?
Right.
So, how do we determine fact and fiction? And what I mean by fact and fiction is we know that, the universe is probably, I know already that the universe is probably a vacuum of many different things. And it is a rather curved vacuum of things. And there's many different reasons, scientific reasons for that. But we already know that our planet is in a solar system, in a galaxy, specifically in the corner of basically a bottom of a table in a galaxy that is in a curved vacuum. So, the biggest questions that I guess I would love your philosophy on is what is what do you think the truth is about black holes?
Oh, well, great topic, Aaron. And there's so many things because by nature, when you talk, I do a lot of outreach, and by nature, when I talk to people about this, the things that come up are the big questions, right? What's the truth? God, aliens, black holes, time travel, all this stuff, right? I mean, you just can't help but to wonder and ponder. And it's such a wonderful thing. It's a delicious stretch of the brain to do this. So black holes are really an interesting phenomenon, and I think I think probably the best black holes do several great things for the human race. Um, One is they excite our imagination, right? I mean, it's just did you know, for example, it's I was reading this. It depends on the type of black hole, but the black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy is a supermassive black hole. So it wouldn't do this. The black hole has to be smaller, several stellar masses, for this to have such a dramatic difference in gravity for this effect to take place. So what would happen is if we were unlucky enough to fall into a black hole, when we got past a certain point and we were falling in, the tidal forces at work on our feet versus our head would be a lot different, and we would turn a couple miles long. We'd be killed instantly too. And that process is something astronomers call spaghettification. Right? So we'd turn into a piece of human spaghetti, feet being pulled much farther away from us than our head, like that. Well, that's really something to think about, to turn into a piece of human spaghetti. So that's one thing they've done. They've really excited our imaginations. What's inside a black hole? What happens? And then the next thing is it's such a challenge to astrophysicists to figure out what's going on with these black holes, because the rules of physics sort of break down. One of the things, and I'm going to be embarrassed if they've already figured out the answer, but my understanding of it is Einstein's theory of relativity explains things that are big and heavy, and quantum mechanics explains things that are small and light. And these theories don't get along, and the quantum mechanics deals a lot in probability, and relativity deals in precise calculations, although quantum mechanics has its insane number of math, or amount of math involved with it. Einstein hated quantum mechanics, and he famously said, God does not play dice. And he hated the idea of what he called a Wood universe. Quantum mechanics leaves things up to chance. We can't know exactly the position and the velocity, or the position and the velocity of an electron. The more we know about one, the less we know about the other. That's called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And then, so Einstein hated this. So normally this is no problem, because we can explain big, heavy things, stars and planets, and the rules of nature apply to them. And then we can explain small, and then we'd use the Einsteinian view on things, and then we'd use quantum mechanics to explain the small and the light. So we got the big and the heavy, and the small and the light. Electrons, protons, neutrons, those things, and it explains them very well. Great. What happens when you get something that's small and heavy, like inside a black hole? And that's when the laws of physics start to break down, and that's pushing us to come up with new things and think harder. And that's frustrating at times, but that's definitely a good thing. So that's what I would say about black holes. And then, they're so mysterious. We don't really know a lot about them because they're so hard to study. We're learning more every day. It's a fascinating topic, but who knows what happens? Is matter destroyed? We don't know.
I have a theory, and
what's your theory?
Way, my theory does not come from science. By the way, I never took astronomy. I never took science classes. So anything I know is based on research or based on my hobby interests or things I've learned over the years. I'm suspicious that and you know it better than I, that when we look around a map of the universe, we see that there are very strategic and mathematical positions for every object in the universe, especially black holes.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure that black holes are simply portals to parallel universes. And that once we figure out how to safely enter the event horizon, and once we're able to flick some sort of an object through a black hole, we'll actually be passing the object to a parallel universe. And there's no other explanation for why whoever created the universe would create an object that is so fascinating. Perhaps, of course, the reason why they're there is to make us think about parallel universes.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, so what's the truth? Are there parallel universes? There's tons of people who have made YouTube videos about saying, I had a parallel universe experience where this other me was listening to a podcast, blah, 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 blah. But from your perspective, from the perspective of factual astronomy, what validity does my theory have that a black hole is a portal to a parallel universe?
Well, I think with most things about science, that I think is really important right now is that it's unknown. There's a lot of it's my favorite. I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this, trying to be precise in my speech. There's there's a lot of talk about science now, and I think my favorite, and I think a lot of the talk is being perverted. And what I like about the scientific method is that it always has room for uncertainty in it. Now, you can know something, or you can think you know something, and you can keep going along, but if you find something that contradicts what you know, then it invalidates it, right? So in other words, if I think an apple is red and I go along, but then one day I see a green apple, if I if I hypothesize that here's a red apple and all the apples I've seen are red, so that means all apples are red. Well, that's true until I see a green apple, right? And if I see a green apple, that blows up my theory and I have to start it again. Something like a black hole, it very well could be the case. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. There's the whole thing about the white hole. So the black holes from nothing can return from it, and a white hole is nothing can go back into it. Right? So it's the opposite of it. People wonder, well, is it the other side of a black hole?
Yeah.
Right. So if you take like a piece of paper, right, and you put a dent in it or like a pen point in it, right, or even well, I hate it when people like talk about things that are outside of their purview and try to relate, but a braille dot on a book, right? So like, well, you have the dot pushed up from one side, right? So where the dent is, that would be the black hole, and the thing coming up, the bump that we
Outstanding.
actually feel
I
would be the
loved
white hole.
that. You know what? You made an outstanding analogy. That was
Thank you.
that was magnificent. That was a magnificent analogy to explain your ability is truly stellar. To your ability to explain things you're really gifted in that
Oh,
because
thanks, yeah.
that really helps a blind person to understand. I have some usable vision, so I can see a YouTube video. I mean, I imagine what a black hole looks like on a YouTube video. Yeah, I don't want to necessarily say that I want to see a black hole in real life. Although with everything us Homo sapiens have been through, I'm only 30 years old. Everyone in my family lives into their upper 90s, so
Nice.
probably I'll end up seeing some sort of a black hole or some sort of a catastrophic uh, astronomy, solar
Yeah.
system incident. But no, actually, but no. What will probably happen is that we as people will self-destruct on Earth before the solar system destructs us. That's
Seems
definitely what will happen.
probable. Yeah. So we
We
should be
we are
careful.
actually. I'm more afraid of people. Actually, I'm more afraid of people than I would be of a black hole.
Yeah,
But
seriously. Yeah,
seriously,
black hole's more predictable, that's for sure. But
yeah, because it's good because I know. You know what? I'm at peace with it. I know if I see a black hole, that's it. The end. But
right,
if I see a but if I see a person, I don't know what to think. Is something
yeah,
horrible going to start?
mm,
How long is this going to go on? This could go on for 50 years. But
right.
that's the overwhelming fact. The other thing is, of course, and that proves my point. That I mean, I can't say proves, but that gives what I'm saying more backing. It's not fair for me to say that, but you know what I mean, guys. That gives it more backing because a white hole is the other side of the parallel universe, helping matter, I guess, to fly to other parallel universes on the other side.
Yeah.
Something like that. Probably that's what it is. I'm just fascinated by that notion. So of course, I'm also suspicious that astronomy will help us figure that out, and I hope that we find the truth. Speaking of truth,
Yeah.
let's get the questions a little bit harder. So
Sure.
you brought up God, aliens, and time travel.
Yeah.
Well, do you know that I love talking about God, aliens, and time travel, which then
Fantastic.
leads me to ask you, so what's your opinion of God, aliens, and time travel?
Yeah, great question. And I guess I can't blame you for bringing it up, right? It's like
Well,
I
you
did
brought it up.
it. Yeah, well, so this is something that I'm really curious about. And so you're the first person I've publicly talked about with this. I've done a couple of presentations and I've sort of alluded to it at the end, but here I am on record talking about it. So I'm really curious about. So I'm going to answer your question, but I want to preface the question. I'm really curious about the split between science and religion.
Mm-hmm.
So because it's so emotional for people. And if something's so emotional, and it seems at first glance like a really dry topic and a pointless topic, right? At first glance. Now, it's obviously not, but if you say, okay, why would we get in an argument? Like if I said, Aaron, red is blue, you might be like, oh, okay, right? Whatever, right? It's like, well, that guy's weird, and you just go on, right? But if I said, God isn't real, or God is real, or science is wrong, or science is right, and people, myself, I've flown into rage about it before, and I'm a lot more level-headed about it now, and my opinions evolved on it. So, really curious about that split, and I think I heard it explained really interestingly that it says science tells us what is, and religion tells us how we should act. So they're kind of two different things, as a matter of fact, right? Now, the problem comes from this, and it was illustrated to me when a buddy of mine who's a missionary in the jungles of Brazil sent me this book. And I am a self-described agnostic, although I think that's a cop-out answer. But I don't know what I think. And he sent me this book on religion. He's a missionary. That's what he does, right? And in the beginning, it says, God created the heavens. So there's your problem right there. There's the sticking point, right? So this is what people argue over. It's because the average scientist says, no, he didn't. And the average preacher will say, yes, he did. Okay, so there's a sticking point. And I don't necessarily know if that can be bridged. I don't necessarily know if it should be bridged, right? Because if you make everything equal, you ever mix up your sodas like at the fountain? Like I'm gonna put
No,
a little.
no, because I prefer beer. But yes, go on.
Oh, okay. So when you're a kid, yeah, well, good choice, yeah. But like you ever do that when you're a little kid? You say, "Oh, I'm gonna put some root beer, and then I'm gonna
Yeah,
put some Mountain Dew, and then I'm gonna put all the flavors of the fruit punch, and then I'm gonna put some orange soda and then grape soda, and this will be delicious. This will be like drinking a rainbow, right?" It is not. It's disgusting, and everything's mixed together. So I'm not necessarily saying that the bridge should be, or the gap should be bridged.
Hmm.
However, it's interesting to illustrate the sticking point. Okay, so now you ask about God. So, and then I want to also talk about the weaknesses of the scientific view and the religious view, because why not, right? We're here to raise some eyebrows. So, I have been asking myself that question for decades, and the answer that I've had for myself is this: for me and my belief, God is outside of the physical dimension. And I want to explain that. So, for example, if I'm here on Earth and I'm observing the sun, it is transcendent over me. And if I can go to England and look at the sun, it's still in the same spot in the sky. So the sun, well, roughly, right? So the sun is transcendent over the Earth. But if I go to Jupiter, the sun's going to look different. If I go to the Andromeda Galaxy, I can't even see the sun. So the sun has changed. Now, if I tell a lie in Lynchburg, it's going to feel like a lie. And then if I tell a lie in England, it's going to feel like a lie. And if I tell a lie in the Andromeda Galaxy, I might be temporarily distracted by the change in scenery, but it's still going to be a lie, right? So there's something that is outside of the physical dimension. So for me, God is the up direction. It's an infinite up direction, and the thing at the end of the infinite up direction in the psychological frame. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Your ability to explain is sparkling right through. You're truly gifted in expressing. You're just able to express this very clearly, and so few people are. So keep talking.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so this leads to an interesting thing. So if my view of God is it's not even in the universe, but it is certainly important, right? To me, this doesn't solve the question of God created the heavens and the earth or he didn't, right? So that's the thing of the Big Bang. Like if you start talking about astronomy to a mixed group, well, you're fine until you go too far back in history, and then there's an elephant in the room, right? So the elephant in the room is being addressed poorly. And this was illustrated with, I want to give a shout out to my buddy Casey. So I met Casey 2 years ago. I was doing astronomy in front of the Lincoln Memorial, doing sidewalk astronomy. I had a little telescope out there. And I've been thinking for a long time, like, I want to talk to somebody who doesn't think like I do. Usually, like, you say, oh, there's the moon, it's craters, blah, 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 blah. I want to talk to somebody who maybe thinks the earth is flat, or who thinks, something different, right? So, and I, out of concern for like his own personal views, he doesn't think the earth is flat, but his personal views, he's very religious.
I got scared. I thought Casey was a flat earther for a second.
So out of concern for, but so I want to keep that private. But Casey has a radically different view of the universe than I do. So we got to talking, and at first the conversation was standoffish, and we both thought that we had the proof, right? And actually, even when you mentioned you got scared, right? So there's this view in the scientific community that flat earthers are idiots, right? We think, oh man, you can't possibly have a brain. So here's an interesting thing. This is what's wrong with the scientific. This is a huge weakness that I see now, and I've been so arrogant with my thought process. Is this okay? So we had this conversation with Casey, and I was trying to explain my point of view, and he was trying to explain his point of view, and I thought I had the truth, and he thought he had the truth, and I was going to show him my point through the telescope of something, and I went to say, oh, let's look, and then I said, no, let's have this conversation. So we had the conversation, turned out to be a really productive conversation. And what happened in the conversation was he was able to articulate to me, okay, maybe, but I still have this big distrust of big science, right?
Sure.
And I can say, oh, and the reason that what I got, and I might be wrong about this, but the reason that I got from this is that, well, look at it now. I have a distrust of big science now too, for I think very valid reasons. So if there's no room for somebody to ask a question, that's antithetical to science's founding tenets, right? You need to be able to ask questions. And if you're ridiculed when you're asked a question, well, then you're not going to want to ask a question anymore. And worse yet, it's going to breed distrust. And then you might get things. The feeling is valid. The solution proposed might be easily disproved. So I don't think the earth is flat, just put it out there for a record. But I think the feeling that makes people question if the earth is flat or not is absolutely valid. And the only way that we can move forward in dialogue is to have a really open place where people can listen and ask questions and honestly feel like they can ask a question without being shut down. So, and that was not clearly articulated in my mind until the next night. And I had the telescope out there again. And a lady who was, and I don't even know her name, she was a former outreach specialist for NASA and a solar physicist. Brilliant lady, knew her stuff. And there she was, interfacing with the public with my tax dollars. And I said, I had this great conversation with this guy who, had a different view of space than I do. And she said, oh, I hate those guys. I said, and I just said, and then she went along. And then I thought, wow, there's a huge problem. Right? No wonder we have this dynamic set up, or we don't trust each other, right? If we can't get anywhere like that. Now, an interesting one side, you might say, well, we don't really need to get anywhere, right? Because it doesn't really matter one way or another is one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is like, well, yeah, it does matter. And like, we're all trying to advance as a civilization, and diverse points of view bring a lot to the table. And that being said, again, I think the Earth is round, and I think it's 4.5 billion years old, and I think the universe started in a Big Bang. Absolutely, right? But none of that tells me how to live. So the split between science and religion, I think, is being inflamed by me and my community not listening to people and not being humble and say, well, what do you think and why do you feel like this and what's going on and how can we talk about this, and not really seeing and writing people off if you think differently. um, Trying to think of another way to put this. It's really easy for me to claim the mantle of intellectual superiority just because Einstein said it, but I don't understand what Einstein said at all. Right? Very, very little. That guy was really smart. And until I trying to think of if I'm making myself clear here, it's really easy for me to say, yeah, yeah, what he said, right? Without really knowing what he said. And without knowing, well, why do you have a concern about this that might not be that, in other words, and I'm struggling with this because it's such a thorny topic. In other words, if somebody says something that I think is ignorant, just because I can answer back, well, no, it's not, doesn't mean that I know more, that I'm on Albert Einstein's side, because I might not know more. So until we can talk to each other with that humility and really try to ascertain, you mentioned the truth of something, we're not going to get very far. So we really need to start listening to each other. And that's something that I want to work on. And I don't know how to do that. And I don't know how to do that without alienating everybody along the way.
Well, look, I think, you know what, Josh? I think you're taking the first step. You're coming up to podcasters like me. You're producing content that is intellectual, educational, entertaining, and just lovely by my estimation.
Thank you.
And by the way, that's a fact. How do I know? Because it's my opinion.
Hey, there you go.
So you know what? Here's the thing. I think that what you really said is the material that more podcasters need to be saying. That we need to be willing to have these types of conversations. No, and here's how another way that I approach the flat earthers. Here's what I say. I say something to the effect of, well, I might not agree with you, but you could be right. Who are we to say if the earth is a sphere or flat? Right?
Right.
Just intellect. Just
right.
But see, right when I said that, you started to push me. You started to push me. See,
right.
But the fact is, neither one of us are God. Neither one of us created the universe. So it's not for us to say if it is. The other theory outside of the aliens that is even more fascinating to me is this whole simulation paradox. And there's so much more information that's surfacing to prove that maybe what we're doing right now is simulated. Maybe our lives are a simulation. Maybe we're living in a matrix, right? What do you know about that? What do you think?
Well, definitely want to talk to you about that. Just want to clarify something I said. So when you said, yeah, I was pushing back, I think so. Really, for me to be really precise in what I'm saying is very important for me. So when I'm talking about dialogue between say the religious and the scientific communities, I'm not necessarily. I'm firmly in a to whatever you want to think is fine. That doesn't, in my book, that doesn't mean whatever you want to think is necessarily correct. I think the Earth is round, right? However, that being said, I think the Earth is round, and I think I can prove it, and I see it, and I will bet my whole life savings on it, right? Whole $10. So that being said, so I'm not a relativist about this, but that being said, I think when people talk, there's validity in many different voices in the fact that anybody can be a real jerk sometimes and not even know it. And I think what I'm trying to correct for myself, and that's the only thing I can do, is as an educator from the science camp, is to make sure that I'm talking to people with enough humility so if they have a question or if they have a doubt, and the doubt might be valid, this whole trust the science line, so resent that. That's not scientific. That's religion. That's the worst of religion. That's what scientists are railing against for centuries. It's like, no, don't, there's no trust involved with science, right? So if people have a distrust with something, I want to make sure that's addressed, and I want to make sure that people feel that they can openly discuss that without being ridiculed. So that's what I would say. In answer to your question about simulation, yeah, that's, well, the theory that I heard, that really kind of unsettled me in the way that I don't like to think about how cheese is made, is what if we were, we kept evolving, technologically speaking, right? Maybe not psychologically, but technologically, we keep evolving far into the future, and we develop computers that are so accurate they can make the simulation, and then we are a video game now that a future civilization is playing. That, I don't like to think about that. It's like, no. So, really interesting to think about. There was also something about a hologram on the surface of a black hole that I did not understand that, but that's also something else that I've heard about. And that is not a precise utterance right there. What do you think about it, Aaron?
I think that when you have a suspicion kind of in your heart and soul, and you can't really quite place it,
Yeah,
but I'm suspicious that our lives are a part of some bigger theory, some simulation. I'm pretty,
interesting.
I'm pretty sure because look at all of the war, look at all of the squalor, look at all of the destruction that we as humans have faced on Earth. Here's truly one of the biggest problems, and I talk to students about it and I think about it, is that we've been alive, well, we as Homo sapiens sapiens have been around for at least, okay, here comes another debate. Let's go with between 3 and 5 million years.
Okay.
Our species developed is somewhere along that train. And, science says one thing, God says, people, the religion side says the other. But the overwhelming fact is that we've been around for at least 2,000 years, or I think about 2021 years, if you count the Gregorian calendar, and still we have disease. Still we have famine. Still we have poverty, strife, unhappiness. If we were truly living a life of complete and utter independence from another civilization, wouldn't we have figured out a way to overcome those problems within a 2,000-year period? I certainly hope so. So my
Right.
suspicion is that probably some computer game or some entity, some being, is simulating all of those problems for their own entertainment.
So they'll be like, oh, let's just give them the COVID now. That'll be fun. Like, look, you unlocked a mask package. Like, oh, look, hey, mine has flowers on her mask. Yeah, well,
I
that's
mean,
it.
that's a pretty dark.
Yeah, yeah.
I wasn't planning on. I wasn't going there, but to go there, see,
Well, I mean,
that's a really direct example of
right.
where that could be an example of something that was simulated by a higher being. Now we perceive it to be either an outbreak or creation or politics or all of the above. Yet regardless, I digress. It might all in fact, 50, 60 years from now, we might discover, we have the potential of discovering that all of our experience as people has in fact been a simulation. And I don't know what to make of it. I think it's
Right.
kind of cool. I think it's kind of peaceful. I'm kind of at peace with the notion of being simulated. And I would hope that if we figure that out, I would want to know who's simulating me.
You take the
And I
red pill.
and I would have questions. I would have questions for
You could
them.
interview them. You get on your podcast. You got to say, man, this is the best conversation I've had in a long time. This is awesome. Um, yeah, so simulation. Well, I mean, I guess that's sort of the it's been echoed in earlier phrases of free will and such. I know Elon Musk is big on the simulation thing, right? Which makes me, on one hand, I'm like, well, he's just crazy, and on the other hand, I'm like, well, he's crazy brilliant, and then on another way, I'm thinking, well, he knows more about he has access to greater technology than I do for sure. So that's slightly worrying. And then, well, maybe he's just been smoking dope again. So, I don't know. Elon he's an enigma. It's really hard to tell uh, with him. He named his kid after an airplane or something, right? So, um, would be interesting. And I would hope, because I don't like the idea of not having free will. Um, So I would hope it's not a simulation, but I do see your point of where that would be kind of peaceful, because you're like, well, it's that old Doris Day song, "Que sera, sera," right? Whatever will be, will be, um, and and you just kind of roll along. So okay, so now philosophical question for you. Let's say, for conversation, podcasting purposes, let's say if it was a simulation, how does that change your day to day action? Does it?
I think it would, and I think that the truth is partially unknown and partially hidden. Um, it would change because I think that if we knew that we were being simulated, I mean the same story is told in different ways. If we found a way to live forever, then I promise you we would do absolutely nothing in our lives. Our lives would be meaningless. You
Right,
know?
right.
So it's that whole concept of if we learn to live forever, if we upload our consciousnesses to the cloud, well then we aren't living, right? So in some regards we wouldn't be living if we knew we were being simulated. And another I, and this goes back to the aliens.
Right.
I'm going to say this from the bottom of my heart, and I mean it. And you know what? There's going to be people in the audience who know how crazy I am and how much what a character I am. But I really believe it. I would love in my lifetime to sit before an alien being and to have a conversation. I would love it. I know that I would never get that chance, but the
Well,
question.
I mean, you might.
Well, okay, fine. Fine. You'll call me tomorrow with the email address and the contact details, and we'll send the file up in the cloud, and I'll check for the email next week. But the point is this: what I really believe to be the kind of the crux of all of this is that I I'll give you a mix of two different beers, let's say. And I'll tell you that I think the truth of the universe is that you have to remember a couple of things. That the universe is bigger than we can even understand or comprehend, even with technology. Number two, we at this particular point in our evolution or creation, we do not know what the truth is because we aren't meant to know. Number three, the universe is far too beautiful for it to be simply an evolution. Someone must have created it. So that is the connection between God and science, right? God created the Big Bang and all the beauty in our universe. Now there
Okay.
you go. And that's really the connection, and that's what people don't are not really connecting, is that you don't have to be someone who only believes in science. You don't have to only love God. I love God. I know you do too. Hope you do.
Yeah.
But either way, if you just understand how beautiful the universe is, you should think, well, God knows. God must have created that because it's too beautiful for it to just have developed. So that's truly the point behind that. Now, one other little thing, and then of course I want to dig into something, and we'll circle back to it. But really, I mean, you kind of I don't want to say. I want to say where do I want to take this conversation?
We haven't gotten into aliens yet.
Well, let's go there, but then I want you to be able to promote your podcast, and I want you to be able
Sure.
to talk about that. So go from those 2 points. What do you think?
Sure. But the podcasts are aliens.
Whatever
Well,
floats your boat.
I'll do the normal one first, and then we'll get off in there. So the podcast is called The Night Kitchen. So if you go on SoundCloud, I got to syndicate it. By the time this episode airs, it should be on iTunes and all the platforms. It's called The Night Kitchen. So it's SoundCloud.com, Night Kitchen Podcast. Actually, let me double check that link. Make
You're
sure
right.
it's right. Yeah, yeah, Night Kitchen
You're
Podcast.
right. I'll
Yes.
put so guys click the link in the description. But yeah. So
Awesome.
how
Thank
did
you.
you create such an animated and entertaining little thing there? Go ahead.
So, well, thanks. Well, I came up with the idea. Um, I was coming into my house one night, and the moon was full or nearly full, and it was shining down on my house, and it looked like it would be a great night to travel the universe, if we could possibly do that. And I got to thinking, well, what if you traveled around and you came back to home base on at the house here, and you had your buddies over and you talked about your space travels. You had like your all night kitchen open, and people would be coming by and telling the stories of the stars, sort of like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy,
Yeah.
right? So I got to thinking, I'm like, oh, this would be cool, and I got to working with the Maryland State Library for the Blind, and they wanted something pre-recorded. I said, well, how about a podcast? They said that sounds great. So I also really love old time radio, and I
Hmm.
work a lot with senior citizens. So that's like, I mean, they grew up in the golden age of radio. So I said, well, we could combine some of the science, some of the imagery of not necessarily traveling through space, but observing the heavens, and then try to transcribe the sky in case you can't see it, because there's a lot of different ways to interact with space, vision being just one of them. I mean, you got radio, you got sound, you got, just the most important is just thinking about it, right? So i created the podcast with that, and they said, yeah, we want lots of sound effects. So I just sit there and edit it and find all these crazy sound effects and put them in there and try to tell a story not only with my words but the sound effects. And I think this is one of the most fun things I've done with this is to add rap backing vocals to it. So I've taught guitar for years and years, and I had this one guitar student that he turned into a rapper, and he was good. And he would come in and he would rap this stuff, and he was way ahead of his time. And he would put his track down, and he's like, okay, now I need to do backing tracks. And he had a couple of his buddies by, and he's like, he was talking about having his, he didn't actually have a gun, right? But he's a cool rapper, right? He's like, I got my gun, and his buddy's like, blue. And I'm thinking, okay, that's dumb, right? And then come to find out, then like 2 years later, I heard Migos doing the same thing. I'm like, oh, dude was way ahead of his time, right? So I thought, okay, I need to do something similar, not necessarily gun noises, but similar, like to get the idea of like everybody sitting around a kitchen table talking about space. So I added rap backing vocals to this. So I do my vocal track, and then I do a guitar track behind it. So I'll sit there and play my guitar, and then I'll do my backing vocals, and then I'll drop in all sorts of crazy sound effects. So it really turned into a little bit of like, the cosmos, a little bit of an old radio broadcast, and a little bit of a modern hip hop track. Although it doesn't sound like a rap track, but it has a little bit of that sensibility in it. And I just like mixing my styles. So that's where that came from. So SoundCloud.com/Night Kitchen Podcast. I hope you enjoy it.
I did, and I loved the way that you approached it, and just the animation. Just you really just put just the animation that you put in there with the sound. It's that's the type of thing that, as a creator, as a podcaster, I love it when other podcasters really turn up the volume and really plug themselves right into the episode. And that's what turned me on. That's really what turned me on to your content and wanting to learn from you, is how much you love it and how much you care. But
Thanks,
yeah,
man.
so I mean, the other thing too is I do want to give you the chance, by the way, to ask me a question that I like to say as I come to the close of an episode. I usually say, so Josh, if you can ask me only one question to really make me sweat to see if I'm worth my salt as a podcaster, what do you really want to know about me? Or
Yeah, sure.
what's okay, go with that one.
Okay, yeah. So this is something that I'm real curious to know about. So I have good vision, right? And I interact with the universe in a certain way. How do you interact with the universe, Aaron?
I would say that I interact with the universe based on me kind of maintaining an interest in the subject. I don't have any astronomy tools. I don't have a telescope, but of course you can look up these things and watch videos and hear different podcasts about it. So I think I interact with the universe in sort of a podcastish way where I
Okay.
consume content and consume things that are already on the market to be consumed about it. But that's really, how I interact with it. And I think podcasting is a universal project. We have, guests from all over the world here on Aaron's Opinion. We have listeners who listen on all the continents. So it already kind of is like an astronomy project. It's just we do it with our voices to help people tell stories. But basically, I guess the universe is helping us to tell the story of life and that type of thing. I don't know.
It's such a great model to paint, you know. So like when you think about space, like do you picture it? Do you think about
So I
the
have some
ramifications? Do
use.
you
So
feel it?
well,
What do you do there?
so I have use I have so I have glaucoma and I have some usable vision. So of course I can see colors and understand what color things are. Of course, my perception of color is not the same as everyone else's. It's a whole other topic, but I can perceive the universe visually if I need to in some regard. But I'm more into the philosophical stuff, the aliens, the time travel. I guess I'm more into the unknown things that we don't actually see. Although,
Yes.
as you can tell, I would still love it to actually have some sort of an interaction with some other being in my lifetime.
Oh,
But
that was so cool. That was so cool. I agree. Although, boy, all the toilet paper would be gone from the stores if we knew aliens were coming. You know, look what happened with
well,
COVID, right? They would just do a panic run, man.
yeah, yeah.
They'd be
But
buying the trees.
this is see, and this is why we don't know. The governments will never tell the truth. Of course, both you and I, we secretly know, and listeners to great shows like ours secretly know what the truth is. But or I'm pretty suspicious of what's going on. Area 51 type of stuff, and why they call it 51 because it's the 50th section of time travel, and that whole
Ooh,
51st
interesting.
section. So there you go, right? That's why it's called
Right, right.
51, fifth section 51 of the time continuum. But that gets really crazy. The saddest thing is that we probably will never know until either it's already happened or it's too late. But will we ever know of reservations to be able to talk to some other being and some other thing like that? I mean, I don't really know. I would tell you that I would love to, and the pivotal questions that I would ask a being from another place would be, how have let's go with the Greys. Let's say, how have the Greys conquered disability, and how do we overcome disability as people, and what is the best approach to overcoming and managing disability? Which of course is disability is a necessity for our people to survive. It's a survival, it's a tool of our survival as a species. We have to have people who are born with disability because that's an example of evolution. It's an example of adaptability. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's more. I can't tell you what would scare me more. The aliens, one of these. I mean, there's a ton of asteroids flying around Earth that NASA secretly or publicly knows about, and everybody knows that it's true. There's a lot of asteroids heading in our vicinity, in an astronomy sense, but I think by the time that something happens, I think that at that point in time, we will have self destructed as people. So we may never know the truth. I don't, it's like, which would you, I guess, would you rather survive an asteroid strike or meet an alien? I don't know. That's it.
Oh,
What
I
do you
would find
think?
out. Well, so because I've thought about that, it would be fascinating to meet an alien, but it would also present a professional and social challenge because if you told people you met an alien, you don't know what would happen. so so I've never met one. Um,
Are you sure?
yeah, yeah, oh, yeah. Actually, I am. So
oh, okay.
I've never met one. Although there seems to be like so like the tack that I like to take on the subject is one of it's a little bit of a cop out. So I'll give an opinion as well. So I like to start without an opinion and say, well, there seems to be, to my perspective, there seems to be two camps. The scientific camp is that we have never found a different civilization.
Which
And we
is, by the way, which is a lie. That's factually not true. But yeah.
Oh, so well, actually, well, tell you what. Let me
Okay.
say this, and then feel free to correct me. So we haven't found the little green man, and the way that we have that the distances are, um, and there are so many things. Why haven't we found them? Maybe they're at a different time. If maybe they existed before or after, or maybe we're the only people around. So that's one side, and then the other side is you have all these records of um, people saying, "Well, I've seen them, I've met them, I've shot at them with a fighter jet," and all these things, and you
Hmm.
have it on that side. So you have this big split of well, it's not even possible, and we don't have any record of it, and everybody's saying yes, we have much record of it. So I find the whole thing really interesting to observe.
Yeah, yeah, and the problem is if we believe it's true, then we're crazy. But we would be crazy not to believe it's true if it's true. It really exemplifies the phrase, I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't.
Right,
You
right.
can, but what would you say? And luckily or unluckily, I can't tell. I will tell you that I have never been abducted by aliens, but there are many people who have written books about their experiences. They have done videos on YouTube where they're crying, expressing how scary it was. So what do you make of those people? Philosophically, and what do you think?
Man, the first thing I'm going to give you the lamest answer in the world, and I haven't thought about it,
Well,
and
that's
I don't
that's
know
not lame. That's great. That's a good
so
answer. Good.
and I don't know why I haven't thought about that. So I'm going to think about it more. Um, I think it's an interesting dynamic. I think it's actually aliens or not. It's a canary in a coal mine of a bigger problem we have because well, you can't believe everybody,
Right.
but you have to believe some people, right? So how do you know? There's several problems. You have to know what the truth is, um, and then there's the scientific community is loath to admit how dogmatic it is, um, but it really. I heard the phrase recently that there are no atheists, and I thought, what? Yes, there are,
Yeah, there's tons of them.
but if you look at it like this, if you look at how people act, if you use that phrase, not necessarily as in a Judeo-Christian sense, right? If you look at God as a word to describe the highest ideal that you hold, then everybody by definition has a God, even the worst psychopath in the world, right? You have a hierarchy of ideals, and it's the highest ideal. So science certainly has a God, right? And our scripture is the scientific method, or it should be. But just like any church, it can become calcified and you can't question it. So it's a lot more dogmatic than we would like to think. Uh, and I have to shout out to my dad. He's been pointing this out to me for years, and I'm always like, "No, it's not." And no, I think he has a point. Um, so the people about talking about the aliens, it's unfortunate now that it's segregated into quote unquote crazy people and rational people. And I think that's creating a lot of problems. So I don't know about the aliens. I've never seen one. I prefer not to see one for the reason of I don't want to be thrust into that debate.
Right. Right.
So
It's a
yeah,
very it's an absolutely this has been an absolutely incredible conversation. Um,
agree.
and I just cannot thank you enough for being willing to talk about all these topics. I love talking about this stuff,
Yes,
and you talked about it in such a well spoken way and an entertaining way, and I cannot thank you enough for it, and I sincerely hope that you will guest on other great podcasts and know that you are always welcome here on Aaron's Opinion, right here
thank you, Aaron. And hey, if I might ask your audience a
Sure.
question, whether that's cool. If anybody's listening in, if you have any ideas for blind astronomy, or if you'd like to even talk or argue about the well, I prefer not to engage in arguments, but if you'd like to have discussions about any of these topics, but I'm especially interested in talking to other blind and low vision people about what I can do for my part to help. Well, I don't want to say help bring you the sky because that implies that, oh, I'm helping you. To be of service would be a better way to put it. To be of service, to use my perspective to enhance your perspective, and I would love for you to use your perspective to enhance mine. So please feel free to write me, Josh Urban at protonmail.com. That's JOSHURBAN at protonmail.com. And actually, Aaron, I wrote you a little piece. We have one more second?
Of course we do.
All right, so I wrote this last night. So I went outside and looked at the stars and said, I'm going on this podcast tomorrow, and I wanted to write you something. So I was looking up at the sky. Yes.
Okay, that's truly, you know what? That touches me more than the conversation itself. The fact that you took the time, the fact that you're crazy enough to write something for me, even though you don't know me, okay, man, that's cool.
Oh, but wait, there's more. I typed it in my vintage electric typewriter with a cursive font, so it's super hipster.
Blind people love reading cursive, right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So wait, no, that's not very accessible, is it? So I'll read it out loud. So it's called "Walking into Infinity: A Piece for Aaron." A cold December wind steals through the leafless branches of the pecan tree as I creep outside to say hello to the night sky. And by the way, I did this like in one take because it's a typewriter, so it might be grammatically incorrect. But a few cars roll on in the distance, but it's mostly quiet here down in the country, save for the wind chimes gently ringing on occasion and an old gate creaking in the wind. So that's one of the things with doing astronomy. There's a lot going on besides just looking, right? There's a lot of feels and sounds. The stars overhead blaze fiercely as my feet crunch on the gravel driveway. It seems as if I could walk into infinity. Orion, the mighty hunter, jumps up over the mountain, his faithful dogs following him with winking blue eyes, chasing the celestial rabbit who runs towards the radio tower on the mountain, blinking with their artificial stars to warn airplanes of their presence. The Pleiades, that's a star cluster, fly directly overhead, a glittering icy kite of starlight, nearby for galactic standards of 444 light years. My car cools in the driveway after a 4-hour trip out to the farm. It would take me 4.5 billion years to drive to the Pleiades if I had a space highway. Gemini, the twins, rise in the east, Castor and Pollux being their main stars. Stately, subtle, quietly confident, with the winter Milky Way, a hazy river they dip their feet into. The wind rings the chimes again, rustling through the empty stables. My face is cold as I gaze upward, gravel digging into the soles of my shoes, as I marvel at infinity. Countless stars swim into field of view as I scan with binoculars, the cold December wind finally convincing me to head inside. I bid goodnight to Betelgeuse, Aldebaran, Sirius, Rigel, Capella, and all the other luminaries of the night, and relish the warmth of a cozy den here on planet Earth. Winter starlight filters down through the cold branches outside, and I feel quite peaceful to be part of something so majestic. What a universe! There you go. That's for you.
I loved it.
Awesome.
Well, let's say that was absolutely magnificent. Thank you so much, everybody. Don't hang up, Josh. And we'll see you next time. It was an absolutely magnificent episode. Thanks so much. All right. I look forward to your comments. Absolutely perfect.